Hey folks, welcome to another Duende live stream. I'm really excited about today's topic and the folks that we have here. But before we get to that, first of all, thank you for joining us. But before we get to that, let's do a little bit of housekeeping like we typically do on these live streams. If you're joining us in chat today and you're watching this live, please leave some messages. We have folks from Duende in the chat ready to answer your questions, engage with you, have some fun. So please use the live chat. It really helps. I will also say if you have any questions about today's live stream, please put them in the chat. We'll gather those questions and ask our guests at the end of the live stream those questions and get those answered for you. A big question that usually gets asked in these live streams: is this being recorded? Yes, it is being recorded. If you want to watch this, if you want to pause, come back later, rewind, this video will be available on our YouTube channel. So this is also a good time to remind you, if you want to come back to this video or any other content that we produced here at Duende, please subscribe to our channel. If you like this live stream, please be sure to leave us a like. And if you want to find out more about our future live streams, hit that notification bell, subscribe, and you'll be notified of any future content. So on that note, I'm going to introduce our guests today. They are part of the Duende engineering team here. I'd like to welcome Adam and Damien. Thank you guys for joining us today. We're really excited about this. So,
hi everyone. Yeah, great to be live. Great to be here. Thanks.
Hey folks, good to see you.
Yep. So today, as folks probably saw from the YouTube thumbnail, from the announcement, we're going to be talking about user management. A lot of the Duende community right now either has ASP.NET Core Identity as their user store, or have implemented their own custom user stores as well. So let's go back to the slides and we'll kind of go over the agenda that we have here. So first, let's just talk about ASP.NET Core Identity. We're going to talk a little bit about what that is, how people are using it today. We're going to talk about Duende user management and the first look that we're doing in this live stream. Just know that anything we show you today is still a work in progress. And we'll explain why we're building it, how we're building it, and how you can get involved in that process. And then that obviously leads us to our Duende Product Insiders community. Damien will talk a little bit about that later. So first of all, let's talk about ASP.NET Core Identity. And to set the scene, we have to go the whole way back to 2013. So if you're feeling old, if you feel like your knees are about to give out, don't worry, you're not alone. I'm there with you. So in 2013, I actually had to look this up. Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens was announced. I think at the time it didn't even have a title. It was just kind of like a working title. The Doge meme was very popular amongst everybody. The Harlem Shake. Sorry, if you're Gen Z out there and you're seeing some of this, I apologize. You don't know what any of this stuff is. We've wasted a lot of time playing Flappy Bird. The iPhone 5S first introduced Touch ID fingerprint security, which is kind of wild to think about. And the most viral song of the year was What Does the Fox Say? So, you know what also happened in 2013? ASP.NET Core Identity, at the time ASP.NET Identity, was introduced with MVC 5. And in 2016 was rewritten as ASP.NET Core Identity. So for folks who don't know, ASP.NET Identity and ASP.NET Core Identity are really a user store. They're kind of a base implementation to help you store usernames, passwords, profiles, that kind of stuff that you typically will see with an authentication system. And like we mentioned previously, ASP.NET Identity manages user records. when integrating with Duende IdentityServer. So it provides you the username, password mechanism to allow people to log in, and IdentityServer handles kind of the OpenID Connect OAuth parts of it. So that's a summary of ASP.NET Identity. Folks probably are familiar with it. If you're not, you can go read more about it. But, a lot has happened since 2013. Obviously, you can imagine the world's a much different place in 13 years. So I'm going to open it up to Adam and Damien here. Let's first be gracious to ASP.NET Identity because it's offered the community a lot. What are some of the likes you think the community respects about ASP.NET Identity?
So I think one of the things it gives you is a place to start from, right? So you're not on your own, right, from the start. So you want to do username, password, login. It does the password hashing for you and that kind of stuff. It gives you a place to put your user profiles. It's got like a implementation of 2FA for TOTP and that kind of stuff. It's recently had Passkeys added as well. So it's at least you don't have to start with a blank piece of paper, right? It gives you a starting point.
It is a decent solution accelerant. You can do quite a bit just out of the box, and then you can, I guess, eject and then take it on your way, and then you own the code.
Yeah. I will also say, it's like a lot of things in the .NET community, especially that it's Microsoft backed and typically a free community option for building a solution. So like you, Adam, you mentioned like it's a good starting point. Damien, you mentioned it's an accelerant. Those are all true things about the product or the project of ASP.NET Identity. But over 13 years, there's been like a lot of cruft. So let's talk about what we think and why we're doing this live stream today. What do we think could be better in ASP.NET Core Identity? So again, Adam, Damien, what do you folks think could be better about ASP.NET Core Identity?
All right, where do we start? Damien, do you want to start off? Or
It's as I say, it's a good solution accelerant. However, when you adopt it and have you need to make some adjustments to it, you must eject the code into your solution, make the changes, but then you're kind of somewhat on your own then going forward with maintaining that. So upgradability, I think, is a bit of a challenge with it. Also, kind of out of the box, you get some capability around user self-service and some UI, and there's still quite a lot that you still have to build out for a more complete user management solution.
I think that is a good point, that you end up building a lot around it, like to get where you want to be. And I think for me, that last line, doesn't guide you into the pit of success, kind of would summarize how I feel a little bit about it, because a good library, framework, package, that kind of thing, I think a good measure of the value of something like that is how much does it guide you into the pit of success. And I think the bullet points above that are kind of reasons why it doesn't do that so well, right? There is a godlike object. There's like this massive interface, and it can kind of do everything, and you don't know what you should use and where. And the EF core migrations, that's what Damien just touched upon. So the upgradability, you want to add a new user profile, you want users to suddenly start storing their favorite color or something. That's an EF migration, right? That's downtime, taking system offline, migrating, and coming back up again at some point. Slow enhancement cycles are a little bit different. We can touch on that a bit more, but difficult developer experience is part of that godlike object and having to work around a lot of things. And those critical security flows, you have to. There's a bit of an industry that's built up around that, around actually providing secure flows around it, because you can do it, right, but it's just not that easy. You're just not guided into that bit of success so well.
Yeah, like I work on the customer success team here at Duende with other folks like Martin, Wesley that you've seen on other live streams. And if you go look at our docs, you will see part of our upgrade path typically centers around EF core migrations, right? So most people, when they're upgrading from one version of Identity Server to the next, the latest and greatest, they will have to figure out what that database migration strategy is. You know, sometimes, again, we all work in development teams. We have limited resources, limited time, urgency, and trying to plan for something as potentially volatile and scary as a database migration. That typically involves a lot of individuals, a lot of people, and a lot of stakeholders. And I think that is the dangerous part of it, especially when you're talking about something as critical as your authorization server, the heart of most modern solutions. So yeah, it can be pretty scary. So, oh, by the way, Adam, the godlike object, I was looking at ASP.NET Identity the other day, has about 50 plus methods that hang off of the user manager class. So there is a lot. there's a lot there. So
But manager is a word that you use to name something when you can't think of a better name.
Like provider, helper, user utility.
helper, manager, service. Yeah. So I'm sure we're all guilty of naming something that like that. So let's get to kind of let's talk about what we're building here at Duende to kind of look at ASP.NET Identity and kind of give people our opinion of what we think user management could be and maybe should be. So let's kind of, again, go over the quick history of our implementation. So Damien, do you want to go over this list, give people kind of a perspective of like why we ended up going down this road?
Sure. I think if you look at Duende IdentityServer, it's a very, very solid protocol server. But to build out a reasonable, I guess, solution and offering, or a solution, user management is obviously a key aspect. So we have been have had an integration with ASP.NET Identity over the years. Judging from our user download count on NuGet, I think 60% of our customers are using the integration package. So it's clearly, I think, a little bit for us, it's a little bit of a gap in our offering. I think we can do a better job here. And so we've all built these things in ASP.NET Identity and custom solutions in our own career journeys on the way to Duende over the years. And we say we're very familiar with the various pain points, from administrative tooling to things like dynamic schema, custom security flow journeys, that sort of stuff that you typically then have to build out. So we are expanding our product offering into this space a bit. Not to say that anyone who's currently on ASP.NET Identity, that all still works. Okay, so if you've invested in that, it still works for you, and we still have that integration. That's not going to go away. But we'd hope that we'd have a more complete, improved developer experience, capability, operation aspect for a user management, and a better extensibility model for the different types of authentications and flows that one might do. So we're envisaging, say, this a combination of this as a more complete product offering. Adam,
okay, yeah. I mean, to get Adam's perspective, you know, on the last slide, we talked about the pit of success and like guiding people towards that. Like when we look at the code and the SDK that we're going to offer and libraries that we're going to offer around user management, like what's our style? Like what's our ethos when we're building libraries? Adam, could you maybe talk a little bit to that point?
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the things we want to do is is to make it difficult for you to do something suboptimal, right? And the way to do that is with very specific interfaces for very specific contexts. Actually minimizing what the API does to some extent can actually help there sometimes. I'll actually show an example of that when we look at some code. And you see things like basic attack vectors. So if we take account enumeration, first of all, account enumeration is one of the very simplest things. All it is leaking the existence of an account to someone who doesn't own the account. Now, a lot of websites unfortunately do this, right? So the way to tell is if you go to a website and you put in an email address which isn't yours, that you get that the website will actually say to you, account doesn't exist or account does exist. Now, with a lot of APIs, and unfortunately ASP.NET Identity does fall into this, it's very easy to leak that information out. So we're designing our SDK to make that difficult to leak out. It's actually very difficult for you to get to determine the existence of an account before you actually try and authenticate. So that's a simple example. So that's one of the driving kind of heuristics of how we're designing things.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it in the next section, but like the specific pain points that we're addressing, we'll kind of cover. These aren't all the specific pain points, but maybe they're like the most ones we want to highlight. But we'll also talk about features. You know, this last bullet point is really future facing. We talked about ASP.NET Identity being built 13 years ago, but a lot's happened in 13 years. What are some of the features that folks can expect from our implementation of user management versus something like ASP.NET Core Identity? Damien, maybe you can take this one.
Yeah, I'm actually going to defer that one to Adam because he's been working on it for for quite a bit of time. He's a bit more insight.
Yeah,
go ahead, Adam.
So the thing is, like, ASP.NET Identity has had to evolve as time's gone on, and for instance, Passkeys is the most recent thing to have been added. But it's a bit of it feels like a bit of a kind of a bolt-on, right? And it's a little bit kind of railroaded in how you can use it. So one of the things that we want to do is provide ultimate flexibility. So we want to take Google, for example, right? When you log in with Google, it gives you various ways of logging in, right? And let's say if you've chosen a passkey in the past, then it will offer you a passkey. But if you can't use a passkey, well, choose another option, right? That's a kind of experience we want to allow you to build. Like you can even say at the most flexible level, okay, well, here are all your authenticators, choose 4, right? Or choose 3 or choose 2, however many you require to log into your website. So we want to build it with that philosophy from the ground up, that we're not going to kind of like say, well, you must first log in with your password and then you can have a TOTP from Authenticator. It's up to you. You can compose that from the pieces.
Yep. And for folks who aren't familiar, like what is TOTP? Can you explain what that term is? I know we're seeing things like passwordless OTP on here and TOTP. What are some of those technical terms and what do they mean for developers working on an identity or user management system?
Okay, that's a good question, right? So different types of authenticators. So OTP, right, one-time password. That typically refers to a password you can obviously only use once. That's in the name. And there are various different flavors of that. So the code that you get through an email, that's an example of an OTP. That's a one-time password. You get it through your email address. You enter it into the website. That password's burnt, effectively. You want to do it again, you get a new one. TOTP, time-based one-time password, that's the authenticators. So it's like Google Authenticator, Authy, Bitwarden, whatever. A lot of them provide this kind of functionality, and that's where you register a TOTP and it has a special key, right? And that key is shared with your authenticator, and using literally the passage of time, the two clocks are more or less synchronized on the server and the client, and for the given time and that initial key, they generate a code. And then you take the code from your authenticator, you put it into the website, the server says, oh yeah, use it at the current time, I'm generating the same code, they match, and you're in. What else was there? So Passkeys, that's the WebAuthn then stuff. That's the new hotness, which I would like to actually show in action.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got passwords, of course, right? So passwords, fraught with problems, not the best authentication method, but we are providing the ability to use passwords, right? Because I know that some folks are going to have to
We
use them
debated
for.
that at length.
Yeah,
We debated that at length. Now, this is the pit of success and the challenge of trying to be, a little maybe purist about what you should and should not be doing. But at the end of the day, there's some degree of flexibility has to be done in some of these things.
Part of me wants to put passwords in a separate package with a big warning on it saying,
yeah, deprecated package, build your failure build.
But yeah, no, we do support passwords, and we do the proper password hashing and all the rest of it. So that's all there for folks that need it.
Well, that's a good segue to kind of the next section of this live stream, which is like, obviously we're building libraries to give people the power to build things and kind of improve their current situation. So like, let's talk about some of the pillars that have gone into user management. Some of the pain points that we're specifically trying to address with our user management package. As Adam said, we're going to be showing a demo of maybe 2 scenarios, but there's going to be a lot more. And we'll tell you later how to get involved, but let's talk specifically about what, Adam, you've mentioned. We want to push people into this pit of success, gently, not a hard push, just gently into the pit of success. So let's talk about codified guidance. Like, what does that mean? You mentioned the interfaces. Can you explain a little bit more and maybe explain some scenarios that people might see using our user management package?
Sure. Okay. So, for example, there are certain things that you should provide a user with the ability to do versus, let's say, a system admin. Right. And one of those, it would be setting a password. Setting an email. Right. Let's forget that password.
The password thing. No, don't go there.
I've got passwords in my head now. No. Right. So setting an email address. Right. So it's feasible for an admin to come along, and especially in an internal intranet system, to come along and set someone's email address. But from a user self-service scenario, you wouldn't want a user to be able to do that. Like, you don't want a user coming along the internet and going, "Hey, my email address is this email address, which I don't own," and the system going, "Hey, cool, all right, that's your email address." What you want to do is actually authenticate that email address through an OTP, right, by sending a code to the email address, and then you've proved that that person owns the email address. So if you're writing a self-service web page for people to self-service their own accounts and then want to add other email addresses to it, the interface that you inject into your Razor Pages controller or your Blazor app or whatever you're using will only give you the methods to authenticate an email address. But if you're writing an admin page for an admin to do that work, you take a dependency on, say, like an iUserAdmin object, and that does give you the method to just set an email address. So I think that's a very good example of guiding people towards the pit of success. Because if I'm writing a user self-service page and I'm taking a dependency on the iUserAdmin, that's a very strong signal I'm doing the wrong thing. I should be taking the dependency on the iUser self-service object.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know, we're talking a lot about interfaces and code. Damien, yesterday you talked about, like, we're still here at Duende producing SDKs, right? Can you talk a little bit about, like, philosophically, like, why code is still important for, our audience or community, and why codified guidance is kind of our approach to helping ship our expertise to development teams?
Yes, our philosophy is still very much SDK, and we're taking a layered approach. So you can perform actions at different levels through clear API infrastructure, as Adam has alluded to. We have additional layers potentially coming forward around administrative interfaces and UIs and so forth, as part of this. But we also recognize that our software is used in many different contexts and scenarios and situations. Sometimes it's redistributed inside someone else's software product. Sometimes it's internet facing as a IDP for custom multi-tenant IDP, and sometimes people are just running it internally. So we have to take into account all those scenarios and use cases, all the different types of I guess entry points, layers, and so forth. So we're still very much taking a philosophy is very much a building block, component orientated mindset that allows you to potentially have much more going out of the box from ground zero. But if your needs must, you can deviate. And the approach we hope we're taking that can help this is that you can deviate safely. And if you take a certain deviations, that you will still be able to do feature upgrades and so forth without, we take breaking changes and compatibility changes very, very seriously. And all this is in the same philosophy that people have grown to expect of Identity Server and its stability over the years.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. For sure. So let's move on to kind of yeah. So moving on to the next pillar, obviously we kind of hit on it in the previous slide, but again, ASP.NET Core identity built over 13 years, maybe a little slow to enhance, just added passkeys, but we're trying to accelerate use cases for our customers and our Duende community. Could either of you folks talk about maybe some of the modern authentication methods that we're planning to put into user management? And maybe any that you've discussed, and maybe this is a good time to ask people watching live, are there any particular authentication methods you'd like to see us tackle? So,
sure. Well, I'll list the ones that we're currently looking at. So just off the top of my head, we've got obviously passwords, right? Let's get it out of the way. And we've got OTP. And OTP is a group of a lot of different types of authentication, because email is common, SMS is fairly common, although that does have some security implications. But you can get OTPs over WhatsApp or Signal or whatever exotic app or delivery mechanism you like. So that's actually an extension point and an API. You can make it it's very easy to plug in an OTP delivery mechanism that we haven't thought of. Then we've got TOTP, which is the authenticators that we mentioned, Bitwarden and Authy and Google Authenticate, all the rest of it. We've got Passkeys, we've got external authenticators, so delegating the actual authentication off to Google or Facebook or whatever. What am I missing? There may be other kind of nuanced flavors. So sometimes when you get a password in an app from the provider. So you go to your bank website and you get a password in the banking app. I think to some degree that's an OTP password, effectively, but there's some nuance there, because sometimes you also get like confirm the code is the same, or press the corresponding button, when it's like you get 23, 91, and 14, and you've got 14 on the screen. So those are kind of slightly nuanced forms of OTP, so we're going to think about those as well. But fundamentally, the way we're building it is that list of types of authenticator is a first class consideration that others may come along. And so this is something that we are deliberately making additive. So yeah, I'd love to hear about any other exotic forms of authenticator that we haven't thought of, or even simple ones we might have thought of.
Push mobile will come, and various variations of these sort of things could be easily extended based off our API structure.
Yeah, I've noticed too, like maybe this is a preview. There is a QR code generator in our user management. So obviously if you're a YouTube person and you've had to log in on a TV or something like that, QR codes are a popular way to kind of express those one-time tokens, like one-time passwords. So that is a common mechanism now, that like UIs are not just browser based or like input box based. They're actually like on TVs, on kiosks, on things like that. So providing user management flows for those kind of scenarios is really, really important as well. So
one thing I do want to, we've already touched upon it, but one thing I do want to call out again is the composability of these things. So it's not just being able to do passkeys or being able to do TOTP or OTP, it's the flexibility to compose those things in any way you like, basically. So, and it's not just requiring 2 factors, like 2 methods, it's requiring N factors, for like highly regulated industries. You have to be really careful, That's the kind of flexibility you want to build in from day one.
Yeah, and a viewer right now asks, like, ability to request step up authentication for compliance reasons. Like, that's what you're talking about specifically, Adam,
Absolutely.
right? Like,
yeah.
Yep.
So the next pillar, we talked a lot about Entity Framework as kind of foundational technology for the .NET ecosystem. And while it brings a lot of benefits in terms of database providers, there are drawbacks, especially when it comes to database migrations and managing those dependencies. So, Damien, maybe you want to talk about this scale-ready storage system that we're building into user management?
So we're not using Entity Framework. That's there you go. Story over. No. So one of the first kind of main pain point is dealing with changes to your maybe user profile or your user schemas and so forth over time. So the direction we've gone is the entity value attribute model, which is a pattern for being able to have dynamic schema. Our storage has certain other capabilities in it, such as an outbox for handling for event-driven workflows, has a dynamic indexing or an indexing capable mechanism for indexing your dynamic schema. And because of that sort of complexity, we're not envisaging folks designing or building their own storage layer. This one, it's the storage layer that comes out of the box. I should also mention that there's multi-tenancy built in from the gate as well, and so we're building our own database providers for this. Right now, it's SQL Server and Postgres. However, if anybody wants to make a suggestion on other stores, maybe even cloud native databases and so forth, we can take a look. But today, I think that'll hit most of our use cases, or most of our customer base as well. And the so the storage is abstracted, and I say our user management depends directly on this. And we feel it's a good design to minimize things like storage migration. Now, never say never. There may be a schema change at some point, but again, it's to minimize that and to give the ability to make schema changes at runtime.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, I'm excited for folks to kind of see that. Like Damien mentioned, right now we're focusing on SQL Server support and Postgres support. But if there's any database engines out there that you're using, like Damien, you mentioned cloud databases like Dynamo from AWS, I think Dynamo, and
Cosmos.
I guess Cosmos DB for Azure folks. So if you'd like to see us support that, let us know in the comments, let us know in chat, or join our GitHub discussions and let us know there. So another important thing that we're focusing on as a pillar is best current practices, encryption algorithms. Probably not much to say about this, but Adam, Damien, like, do you guys have anything specific around this?
Yeah, I mean, we're very much spec driven. So where we do this stuff in our code, you'll typically see an RFC reference or a reference to something from the NSA guidance or something like that. So certainly, I mean, okay, passwords. As much as we don't want to talk about passwords, we do use the latest recommendations for PBKDF2 encryption for passwords and things like that. So it's kind of nice in this space because there is so much. There are so many specs and RFCs for this stuff. It's kind of like you don't really have to think about what to use. It's just like finding it and then referencing it and then following those best practices. So, you know, we're very, I mean, IdentityServer is driven by all of that, right? So that's kind of baked into our DNA as a company. So we're carrying that practice forward to that kind of stuff that we're doing in user management as well.
Yeah, and I guess the last pillar, Damien kind of hit on it. Obviously, multi-tenancy is a first-class concept. Damien, do you have any like thoughts specific around that? Like, why is multi-tenancy important for maybe not every customer, but some of our most important customers are thinking about multi-tenancy? Why is it important to us to implement that?
Multi-tenancy is a very overloaded term, I think. I think you have to try to scope it to a particular context to get an understanding. So for some people, a tenant is an environment, and other people might say a tenant is a customer. Sometimes it's a department, and you want to keep some degree of separation for administrative concerns, and so forth. It is very difficult to retroactively, in my experience, retroactively apply multi-tenancy to an existing system without adding layers and having also kind of separate storages go with that. So we built this as a first class concern. And obviously, I think starting off, it's pooled multi-tenancy, but we're looking at ways of making, you know, things to be composable, where you can actually point to multiple stores through the same API and having tenant resolution. So we're taking this approach, I guess, again, in a broader context within our SDK offering, and this should make things a lot easier, rather than trying to, I said, force something that wasn't designed for it into a multi-tenanted architecture.
Okay, very cool. Well, folks, we've jibber-jabbered a lot here, but maybe this is a good time to actually get into some code. So, Adam, I'm going to give you the stage, maybe give folks kind of like a little first look at our user management library, and some examples using our user management library. So, Adam, the stage is yours. We'll be here, but it's all up to you now.
All right, sure, no pressure. I'll dive super deep, but at least I want to see. I want people to see some of this stuff actually working. So the first example I want to show is one that we talked about a lot. So this is OTP authentication. So this is a sample that we're building alongside our SDK, and I'll just show you in action first of all. Right, so it's a fairly as you'd expect. You know, put in your email address and send your one-time password. We're actually running a local Mailpit SMTP server here. So that just basically takes all the emails it receives and just surfaces them in this UI. So we've got our one-time password here. Copy that, put it in here, and we're in. Okay, and this is just like some debug type info to show you what claims we're setting. So that's the actual subject ID of this user and email address, and this is the method of authentication. So let's have a little look at what's happening behind the scenes here. So switching to code. Right, this is the login page. So what we're doing here is taking the dependency on an IOTP authenticator. Okay, so this is an example of one of these very targeted interfaces, and in fact, it only has two methods on it. Right, so in the login page, we're saying this is all just really kind of UI stuff. This is basically getting the email address from the form and making sure it's valid. This is just a bit of UI nicety. This is we're saying, well, if we've already sent you an OTP, then check again. We can't send you one right away. I'll show that in action in a second, but this is just sort of UI nicety. The key thing is here, right? So taking the email address that's been specified and sending the one-time password. So this is one of two methods on this type. So you've got try send OTP and try authenticate, right? So it's a very targeted interface. Now, one thing to notice here is we are not giving back the one-time password itself. Okay, so we give back this result object. That result object has, let's just navigate to it quickly. That result object has a token, right? And the token is something you pass along to the API with the OTP to make sure that the OTP is being used in the same context. So that's basically just a GUID that you get back. And then this is stuff for UI nicety. So you can tell the user when it expires, and you can say you can't send another one for a certain amount of time and that kind of stuff. But the key thing here is just a token. But the important thing is we're not getting back the one-time password. And the reason for that is that there is no good reason for this code to actually have a handle to that one-time password, because this is a front channel. This is like a front channel a front communication channel, where you're going from the server via the web browser to the user. What we want is the OTP to be sent on the back channel through email. And the thing is, if you give back the OTP here to this code, it's all too easy to somehow accidentally leak that out, right? And there's no good reason for doing that. We only want it to go through the email. So we deliberately do not give you back the OTP from this interface. That is actually done by an OTP sender. So an OTP sender is something you can actually extend as well. So this is where I said earlier about when you want to support WhatsApp or Signal or some other OTP delivery mechanism, you can define your own OTP sender to do that sending. But that type is injected during wire up, and you don't actually interact with it here at all. So effectively, the sending of the OTP to the email address is done in the background. So once that's done, we then record that token, right? We actually put it into a cookie. So we actually have like a little helper method here to put some OTP data into a cookie. And then in the enter OTP page, again, we've got some kind of like boilerplate stuff here, which is pulling out the OTP data we saved in the last page, getting the email address, parsing the email address, and then this is a key thing, the try authenticate. So here we're taking the dependency on the same type, the IOTP authenticator, and we're taking the OTP that we've actually been given. We're taking the token that we got back last time, and with those two things we can authenticate. If we've got the right token from the earlier call, which we stored in a cookie, and we've got the OTP, which was sent to email and given back to us by the user, then that will succeed and they will be authenticated. And that gives you back an OTP address. An OTP address is basically a channel and a subject ID. So the channel is effectively just a wrapper for a string, right? For anyone who's familiar with primitive obsession, we're trying to steer away from that here. So we have quite strong types for all this stuff, but effectively an OTP channel is a wrapper for a string. So we've defined some common ones: email, SMS. But when you're extending this, you can just define your own ones. So that basically says we were authenticated via email, and the subject ID. So subject ID has several. Let's just navigate to that. Subject ID is abstract, and we're defining an email address, phone number, and opaque subject ID. Now, you remember earlier on I said that we reference RFCs and things like that. So this all is defined in an RFC, as is an email address, right? An email address as a subject ID is defined in this RFC here. So once we've authenticated and we've got that OTP address back, so effectively saying we're authenticated via email with this email address, what we're doing here, and this is a choice that the consumer can make, is we are implicitly registering the user. So we're saying you're authenticated, we're going to create an account for you now that you're authenticated. You don't have to do that. You could choose here instead to gather their name and preferences first before actually creating an account for them. That's just a choice here. For this example, we don't have any requirements like that, so we're just implicitly registering the user, but that's a choice you can make. And that's really it for a basic OTP flow. Should I go on to Passkeys now? Are there any questions coming about that yet before I go into Passkeys? If not, then I'll go on to Passkeys. So this is the passkey example. So first of all, I'm going to do an OTP flow, right? So I'm going to enter an email address. I'm going to get an email here with my code. I'm going to enter the code, and I'm logged in. And again, I think we are implicitly creating an account when someone authenticates for OTP. Then if we go to manage an account, we can add a passkey. So it asks you for a name. I'm going to store it in the Apple keychain. So I'm going to call it Apple 1. And then the browser takes over and delegates out to the OS. So this is it. I did actually press my fingerprint then, very briefly. So that's now registered. And now I can log out and I can log in, this time with my passkey. That delegates out to the browser and the OS. I touch my fingerprint sensor and I'm logged in, right? So that's basically passkey in action. We can also use what are called discoverable credentials, right? So before I typed in the email address and I said login using passkey. So I'm saying what my email address is, and then it's checking that all matches with the passkey. What I can also do is not do that and just say, get that from the passkey, right? So I can just say, well, it's going to ask for a passkey. I'm going to allow the passkey to go, and it's going to read that out of the passkey, right? So that's a discoverable credential. And then if I do something like, I can actually have two of these. So if I register another email address here, let's say Bob, and that's Bob's email. And if I register another passkey for Bob, okay, let's save it. And then if I log out, I can log in and say discoverable credential and say, well, you've got two of them. Do you want your Alice passkey or your Bob passkey? This is a pretty cool user experience. I'm not only not remembering passwords anymore, I'm not even remembering my email address anymore, right? I'm just delegating out to the passkey subsystem, and it's saying, well, you've got Alice and Bob registered as passkeys. Which one do you want? Let's go for Bob. And you allow that to go through. And I'm logged in as Bob. So it works pretty well. Now, just showing you a little bit of the back end of that. So passkeys, for anyone who doesn't know, they depend on JavaScript. So the way a passkey effectively works is you make a request on the server. The server tells you what options it requires for the passkey, what kind of constraints. You then delegate out to the browser and the OS or whatever passkey provider you're using. Like, could be Bitwarden or could be anything else, but I'm using Mac OS in this instance. You then that dialog will then give you back the credential, and then you make another request to the server to actually store that credential, and that's a basic anatomy of a passkey. So this was that add passkey button. That actually triggers something in some JavaScript here, an event listener to show a modal, right? And that was the pop-up which asked me for my passkey name, and that is, where is that? That is back here. That is this modal here. That had a continue button on it. That is linked up to this. That hides a modal and it calls handle register passkey, right? So that's the UI bit done. Now we've got now we go into the actual registration of the passkey on the server. So this UI code is part of the sample itself. This register passkey method is defined as a embedded resource in our SDK, right? So this is something you call into that does the actual work. We can look at the source of that here, and the basic steps are, as I said, to get the registration options from the server. Then there's just a bit of like confabulation of types and things like that to get things ready for the local call. Then we actually call out to the browser. So we hover over that, yeah, I mean, this is widely available across most major browsers now. So this the ability to actually create passkeys. That dialog will give us back a credential, and then we make another call to the server to actually register the passkey we've been given. And that's basically it. And that's essentially a passkey flow. So I've gone over that fairly quickly. I think there are some questions in chat. Khalid, is there anything you want to bring in from the questions, or anything you want me to go over again that I might have skipped over too quickly? Or
I think right now the biggest question is, like, folks are wondering, are there any external dependencies with user management? I think that's a simple answer, but I'm going to let you answer it, Adam.
Okay, so our general approach is absolutely minimal external dependencies, because every external dependency we end up owning effectively, because you've got issues around CVEs and bugs and all the rest of it. So we want to take as few dependencies as possible. So in this example, I mean, the only dependency that was effectively used was Postgres, right? Because this is running on Postgres. So we actually use Aspire to orchestrate all this stuff. So this is the Aspire dashboard here. There's a bunch of other samples here, like for TOTP and whatever, that I didn't go into. But you've got passkeys and OTP authentication running here, and that's the backing database Postgres. We've got in memory for an F5 out of the box experience as well, which is actually the default. So if you don't replace it and specify a database platform, you just get the in memory one, which also has a backing file backed option as well. So you can F5 stop your solution, F5 again, you get the same data back because it's file backed, even though it's in memory. So that's cool. The only real dependency that I think we were using while I was talking there.
Yeah. Another question, specifically, I think this gets back to our separation of interfaces versus like user-based interfaces, admin-based interfaces. But if folks are building these systems, users are adding passkeys, will there be a way for folks to administer those passkeys for their users? So in a sense, like adding a passkey or removing a passkey that's like maybe compromised or anything like that. Yep.
Yeah. So we have, let's actually go back to the code. That's a good question, because one thing I didn't show you was, let's go to here, the code behind the account page for the passkeys, because that actually takes a dependency on an iUser self-service, and that has things like try remove passkey, right? So this is an example of a very targeted interface. This will only give you things that make sense in the context of a user, of a user self-servicing their account. There is also an iUser admin interface, which we don't have actually demonstrated in the sample here, but that would have a remove passkey as well. So iUser admin is very much more, I guess it's more CRUD based. It's more like you can pretty much do anything for a user on the behalf of a user. So the short answer is yes. Like there will be admin facilities to do this from an admin screen.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any other particular questions. I know there's a lot of excitement in the chat right now. There's people asking maybe like generalized, like, oh, when can we get access to this? So maybe this is a good segue to get back into the conversational side of this live stream. And then we can talk a little bit about that. So Damien, like, we're doing this now because you mentioned it earlier in the live stream. We want to enable people to build the things that they want to build without investing a lot of time, subject matter expertise. Adam, you mentioned a lot of RFCs. Like we'll take that responsibility on. Like not every team has the time to sit down and read those RFCs. At Duende, we want to take on that responsibility. So again, our core philosophy moving into why we're building these things is to give you the power to build what you want to build and what you need to build. So speaking to that point, like, what are we actually doing here at Duende? Like, can you give people just kind of a 1 minute, 2 minute high level overview of our roadmap?
I think it would be fair to say that we are, as I think I might have alluded to it at the earlier part of the stream, that IdentityServer is a very good token server. But for a more complete solution, you need more bits, all right? And we are expanding on the number of bits in the box. So user management is just, I guess, one part of it and all the authentication system. But there's layers maybe above that we're considering as well, things like SCIM, etc. And there are, so at the moment, for example, let's take a look at IdentityServer today. It has its current architecture is has these iStore interfaces, has optional entity framework implementation of those stores. I think about 55% of people are using that, judging by the download count. People are creating their own store implementations. But there's a couple of things we're missing, I think, out of the box. I think it'd be a better experience, like a fully featured rich management plane. So the kind of experience that you have just possibly been alluded to here as codified guidance that you see with user management would be taking that forward into the identity server space in due course as well. And layering on HTTP APIs there on top of that, so forth. So the management plane will come along. We're considering the storage architecture a bit as well for identity server. Again, matching what we've developed out with user management, but maybe with more of a lean towards not really dynamic schema is not really a huge thing there, but with a lean towards again more native support for multi-tenanted scenarios. And as I said, alluded to, there's an outbox mechanism. There's domain events. So we're thinking about more event-driven, reactive, capable, and observable systems as well. And then from that, there's other opportunities will come along. So it's a bit of an expansion this play here going.
Yeah. Well, speaking of other opportunities specific around user management, if if the Duende community is already on ASP.NET Identity and wants to take advantage of moving to user management,
of course,
what are some things we're thinking about to help people do that migration from one library to another?
So we have a number of options here. So we say starting off user management level, a rich administrative management plane API. So the lowest level, I guess, the importing can be a thing. So you can possibly just export your existing ASP.NET Identity database. And if you've customized it, you might have to customize the importer a little bit. But that includes password hashes and kind of passkey data and so forth. For more sophisticated, I guess, folks who may have stronger uptime SLAs of their systems, there's possibility of running the two side by side in the same host and performing things like trickle migration. We're also, as part of our making identity server more operational, we're re-looking at how all of our background jobs and things are done. So there's another option here of using a background job to do live migration or live sync. So there's a number of options here at play, differing in the types of, I guess either complexity or this type of requirements that you might have from a running system. And we're also considering, again, I mean, if you've invested a lot in user interfaces, what would be, I mean, we don't know what people have built on user interfaces. We can make some guesses, but I think the ideal situation would be to repurpose existing UI capability on top of this. But that'll be a little more nuanced, I think, in reality.
Well, you know what? That's a perfect segue to kind of this next section and appeal. Folks who don't know or may have heard, we have a Duende Product Insiders program. Let's talk about Duende Product Insiders program really quickly and yeah, tell people how they can get involved from user management perspective there.
Sorry, I was wanting to catch you there. Yes, so we've we have an insiders community currently hosting it on Discord. We are exposing. We need to probably expose a bit more now because we've been heavily working. We're going to start exposing more of our work proactively as a lot of our capability and features land. This is an opportunity or a place to interface directly with the product engineering team and the various subject matter experts as we build this out, but also to give valuable feedback. Earlier in the process. We won't, everyone wants everything to be right the first time around, but the feedback is very valuable to us. And I say this is a place for us to be directly connected with us.
Yeah, we've had some great feedback here already. We've had a few things which have directly influenced API design and also confirmed some of our assumptions as well. Like we come up with a solution for importing currently hashed password, and someone asked a great question about that, and they kind of confirmed our thoughts around how we're going to do that, which is a really nice juicy problem, by the way, how to do that. It's really useful.
Yeah, I know, like just from a customer success standpoint, when people have these older systems, maybe built on top of ASP.NET membership, not even ASP.NET identity, like that migration path of taking people like maybe less secure passwords because they used older hashing algorithms or iterations and moving it to a more secure system. That's always been kind of the most challenging part of upgrading your authentication system. So it's good to hear that people in the Duende Product Insiders program are coming to us and asking us about strategies and helping shape user management. So if you folks are still watching and you want to get involved and you want to kind of make your life easier as a developer within an organization, the Duende Product Insiders program is a really good place to jump in and get involved. So on that note, yeah, just go to this link here, duende.link/insiders. You can sign up and then we'll let you into the Product Insiders program. And then like Damien and Adam said, you can interact with our product engineering team and give feedback, get early access to bits. So you can build proof of concepts, show your stakeholders, work with your team members to figure out your responsibilities within the team, all that good stuff. So get involved. And on that note, I think we're kind of nearing the end here. So I'm going to wrap it up. But first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Again, I'm going to do the YouTuber thing and ask you folks to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe, hit that notification bell for any future content. Follow us on our socials. If you want to get more information about Duende products, you can visit our main site at duendesoftware.com. We are on Blue Sky, LinkedIn. Please endorse Damien for XML. I think it's his favorite programming language. No, I'm just joking, yes, Damien.
F sharp.
F sharp as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, join us on GitHub. We have a discussion there. So if you're have any questions, running into any problems, our customer success team can help you. And finally, I want to thank Adam and Damien. They're very busy men, so I'm really happy that you made time today for us and our community. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, folks. We'll see you next time. And yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.